I think the U.S. probably will militarily occupy Greenland during his administration. That's an invasion of Europe. I do think that with the 50,000 people of Greenland, the United States may just decide it's going to take Greenland, and that's that. It won't stand, it won't work for the longer term. It will be a disaster, but it could very well happen. I think the U.S. probably will militarily occupy Greenland during his administration. That's an invasion of Europe. I bet that it will take place. I don't think the U.S. will occupy Canada, but I do think that with the 50,000 people of Greenland, the United States may just decide it's going to take Greenland, and that's that. It won't stand, it won't work for the longer term. It will be a disaster, but it could very well happen. So that's the one kind of response. Trump also, I'm sure, believes that the tariffs are necessary for America to restore its greatness in some sense. And probably what he has in mind is we don't produce enough steel and aluminum to build our arms industry and so forth, and we can't compete with China unless we restore basic heavy industry. So I think that that is, he doesn't express it in a very clear way, and the tariff policy is an absurd way to approach this, and it's going to fail, but it's probably on his mind in the way you're saying, Ronnie, that that this is part of the rebuilding process for the U.S. The problem that I have with all of that is I've never seen more illiterate economic policy. It's not even policy. That's a grandiose term for what passes as a thought process day by day. We have no institution in the United States asking the question about industrial policy or strategy. None. We have no planning agency. We have no NRDC, NDRC. We have no economy ministry. We have no institutional process thinking about America's economic future, because this is not how it's done in the United States. The only industrial planning we have in the United States is the Pentagon, and that's to build, F-35s and so on. It's not to do infrastructure or economic revitalization. So what Trump is doing is complete improvisation. You cannot run a $30 trillion economy on improvisation, but that's literally what is happening right now in terms of government policy. We don't even have congressional hearings where ideas are discussed, where experts testify. We don't have white papers. We don't have green papers. We don't have any process of thinking right now. We have edicts from the White House. That's a very strange way to run a country. The U.S. Actually was never really isolationist. So it's important to understand a little bit of the U.S. history. Remember, the U.S. started as a sliver of the eastern seaboard of the United States, of the North American continent. So the mission of the United States from the beginning was expansion. The U.S. has always been an expansionary force. It was never isolationist. But for the first 100 years, the expansion was across the continent of North America. That was imperialism, because there were many indigenous nations all across, and there was the Spanish, of course. And so the United States built an empire across North America. It wasn't called an empire, but it was effective. And it basically, by the way, unlike other empires, they didn't incorporate the nations, they destroyed them. So the U.S. was more genocidal than anyone else. The demographics were much more in favor of the United States rather than the native populations, which were beset by many demographic woes. And the U.S. exterminated virtually many of these populations. Okay, as soon as the U.S. reached the Pacific Ocean, it started its overseas imperialism. So there wasn't a break. There was expansion from the beginning. And as soon as we usually put the date 1890 as the end of reaching the Pacific, then came toppling Hawaii and beginning the empire in Hawaii. Then in 1898, on completely hokey circumstances, weapons of mass destruction in Havana Bay, we went to war with Spain because they said Cuba is just ripe for dropping into the American empire, and we took Cuba and Puerto Rico and the Philippines. So that was the beginning of the American empire overseas. So I don't think that the U.S. was ever isolationist. In the 1920s, by the way, the Senate rejected America's membership in the League of Nations. And sometimes historians say that was American isolationism, but that was actually the opposite of isolationism. The opposition of Henry Cabot Lodge, who led the Senate revolt against the League of Nations, was that it would limit American discretion. We are an empire, and we will not be beholden to an international institution. So Henry Cabot Lodge was an imperialist who opposed the League of Nations because it called for international co-responsibility, and he didn't want that. He wanted American right of maneuver. After World War II, Roosevelt had a much more collective security vision, but we became the security state, and as I explained, our foreign policy was definitely interventionist, but usually in regime change operations and many wars of choice. So the U.S. is not isolationist, but it never, it didn't take on European powers until the 20th century, when it was, it had become the biggest economy, and until several weeks ago, it didn't acknowledge any limits to its power. Now the question that we're asking is, given that Trump has acknowledged the limits of American power vis-a-vis Russia, will he do the same vis-a-vis China? I think the answer is probably yes. Then what will America do? It still has its expansionary fervor. It will try to beat up its neighbors in the Western Hemisphere. So it's a more limited version of imperialism, which is Canada, Panama, Greenland, too good to ignore, too easy to take. Of course, not really so easy as Trump thinks. The world is not quite as lawless. God help us if it becomes that way, but it's not as lawless as Trump imagines in his mind. This is not a real estate play in Midtown New York. This is the real thing, and Canada's not going down quietly. And my student, Mark Carney, who's now Prime Minister of Canada, said today, no, Canada remains Canada, don't even think about it. And I believe him, and I think he's going to probably remain Prime Minister also in view of the upcoming psychological warfare that's going to come. So can America learn to play by the rules? That's a good question. This rule-based order only liked the rules that America made. And now the question is, can America play by rules that others make or that are made in a shared way? this is what we really need. We need a functional United Nations. We don't have it yet. Trump doesn't like the idea. There's even the fancy term now that they're sovereigntists, that the highest aspiration for a nation should be the right to do what it wants to do, which is a kind of three-year-old vision of the world, not the vision that we should all play by a common set of rules. So I think the United States is going to take some time to learn those basic ideas. As in many things, and I think all of you know it, America's much better than Washington. If you go to Middle America, these are not the views of Middle America. Middle America supports the UN 70% in most surveys. Middle America does not want wars. Middle America, wants kind of normal life. And so our political system got broken. We need to solve the political crisis so that our politics reflects the kind of mainstream, rather more pacific, not war-mongering of American society. All the wars America's been in have either been unpopular or covert. This is quite interesting. Americans didn't say bomb the Houthis. They don't know who the Houthis are. They don't know where Yemen is. They don't have a clue. And Hegseth said as much in the Signal. He said, nobody knows who the Houthis are. We need a story, he said. That's America. We need PR operation. We need a story. It's about Iran. It's about freedom of navigation. No one knows who the Houthis are. I have a principle, by the way, which is, or a principle that I want to establish, which is that the United States should not bomb any country where if at least 50% of Americans cannot name two cities in that country. That would basically end all American wars because Americans don't know any geography at all. So that is my